And now for more insight, it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Benjamin Anthony, the CEO of the Miriam Institute. Benjamin, thank you so much for being
Thanks
here
for having me.
In studio. Much on the go, as we heard there from Owen, much focus obviously on this truce hostage deal in the pipeline. Hopefully, Joe Biden seems to think some kind of answer by Monday. We're hearing Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi also saying some kind of ceasefire in the coming days. Your sense of optimism, how realistic is it?
Well, first of all, completely bizarre scenes when President Biden blurted out that he hoped that the hostage deal would be concluded by Monday while trying to dip into an ice cream cone. I don't think that we'd ever see the parallel take place in the states of Israel. In fact, I struggle to think where we would see something such as that take place.
An unusual setting indeed.
A very unusual setting, but there we are. Look, what I would like to say is that I believe we should think about this through the prism of what I call the three R's, the three R's. So you have Rafah. That is a major consideration for the Egyptians. That's what's pressing Sisi to move forward the urgency and ratchet up the urgency of this hostage deal and try to bring about a conclusion. You then have Republicans. Republicans are deeply worrisome to President Biden, who is about to go into full tilt election campaigning. And then you also have Ramadan. And Ramadan is deeply worrying to the people of Israel and to Israeli policy makers, more accurately. I have to tell you that I think that the days when Hamas got to tell us when the conflicts would begin and when they would end, and where we were expected to subjugate our own interest to the religious interests of Hamas, I think that those days have gone. I think that if Israel and the IDF believes that it is to our benefit to move into Rafah, which I believe it absolutely is. It's imperative that we take Rafah and that we hold the Rafah crossing, incidentally, in perpetuity. If it's required that we do so and we run right through Ramadan, then that is what we must do, because the higher the pressure, the greater the pressure, the more that we are leaning on Hamas. And incidentally, Khania, who is blabbering on over there about what's going to take place and Hamas's readiness to fight. Remember, Khania is nowhere near the theatre of war. He's nowhere near it. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know what's happening. I've seen what's happening, and I want everybody to know the IDF is winning this war. A key part to bringing about the victory we're pursuing, taking Rafah, and the calendar should be dictated exclusively by us.
We're going to take a deeper look at exactly that, specifically that operation that may be happening soon in Rafah and the implications as well. Stay with us. Much more to discuss, because in the north, more rocket fire into northern Israel on this day, this time from Hamas. The terror group saying its branch in southern Lebanon fired a barrage of rockets at the Kiryat Shmona area on Wednesday morning, claiming to have launched 40 rockets at an Israeli army base. The IDF confirming around 10 rockets had crossed that border, hitting one building. No one was injured. The IDF responding, shelling the launch sites. This coming a day after IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi warned that Hezbollah would pay a very high price for its continued attacks on northern Israel. Senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev has more in this report.
Wednesday morning, 8:45. Yet another gruesome wake-up call for the few residents remaining on the northern border communities. A direct hit in the city of Kiryat Shmona, along with various interceptions seen in the skies. Shortly after, the Israeli Air Force strikes various targets north of the border.
Hezbollah decided to join this war on the evening of October the 7th, and we have to make sure it pays a heavy price.
Hezbollah is paying a heavy price, as stressed by the IDF Chief of Staff in his visit to the area, but at least so far, this does not seem to deter it. Tuesday saw nearly 100 rockets fired from Lebanon, many of them reaching further south than usual, meaning areas which have not been evacuated. Drivers on the northern roads dealing with rockets falling right next to them. Nearly 5 months into this conflict, have the sides reached a point where a full-on war is now imminent? For now, there are those who still wish to avoid that.
We have also taken note that repeatedly the defense minister and other officials of the government of Israel, including the prime minister, have said publicly that they would prefer the situation to be resolved diplomatically.
Diplomacy has so far failed. Tit-for-tat strikes are just growing in intensity, and the goals set by the chief of staff seem to be quite far.
We have to make sure there is no Hezbollah on the border fence and also further away from the fence. People will return here thanks to the sense of security and the quality of life.
Security and quality of life are nowhere to be seen here.
So for the latest, let's now go to our correspondent, Robert Swift. He's still in northern Israel. And just in the past hour, red alert sirens sounding across the northern front again. Of course, earlier in the day, Hamas saying it was behind that latest rocket barrage from southern Lebanon, not Hezbollah. That was this morning. What is the latest where you are? What can you share, Rob?
So once again, sirens going off just about an hour ago. This took place in the western end of Israel's northern border. 5 communities there had sirens going off, and we're waiting for more information on that incident. Now, at around about the same time, we're in the far eastern end of Israel's northern border, and about an hour ago we heard what sounded like 2 booms or explosions from the northeast of us. And now, and about 15 minutes ago, Hezbollah have claimed that they launched missiles against a target in the Sheba Farms area, which is an area of territory that Hezbollah claims as Lebanese territory. It's just to the northeast of us. So it seems like what happened there is an anti-tank missile attack was launched, and that's likely why there was no sirens going off in that incident, because often the anti-tank missiles fly low enough that they don't activate the Israel's defense sirens.
And this coming just a day after Herzi Halevi, the IDF chief of staff, warning Hezbollah there would be a very high price for its continued attacks. Clearly, that isn't deterring Hezbollah as we speak.
That's right. There's a sort of a game of chicken being played between Israel and Hezbollah. Halevi is correct to say that Hezbollah will likely pay a very heavy price, as will all people in Lebanon if a war is likely to be triggered. But what Hezbollah is aware of is the fact that Israel will likely pay a very heavy price if a much larger escalation is to take place here. That's why there's a certain level of mutually assured destruction if this route is to be taken, because of the missile arsenal that Hezbollah has. It can do a lot of damage, and that's why we're seeing continuous skirmishes here, but also a war of words between the IDF, Israeli politicians, and leading figures like Nasrallah in Hezbollah. Both of them are continuing the skirmishes, but they're also trying to psych the other out with rhetoric in order that the skirmishes don't escalate into something much larger, which could be a much more serious affair, both for people in Lebanon and for people in Israel, not just those along the border with already tens of thousands of Israelis displaced from their homes. But if a conflict of this nature was to occur, we would likely see much more of that.
Thank you so much. Stay safe. Correspondent Robert Swift, live from northern Israel. More to come from Rob in the coming hours. Thank you. And still in studio, Benjamin Anthony, the CEO of the Miriam Institute. So Herzi Halevi has made this warning again, and we hear the rhetoric on all sides. It has been the case throughout this war, but saying there will be a very high price. Nonetheless, we keep on hearing about skirmishes as opposed to a so-called full-blown escalation. Your take on what is unfolding up north as we speak?
Yeah, Benita, unfortunately, it's actually worse than what we heard in the translation. I was discussing this with my colleague Yaakov Lapin, who I know is a friend of this channel as well, and Herzi Halevi did not say that Hezbollah will pay a heavy price. Rather, what he said was Hezbollah is already paying a heavy price. And in my opinion, that is patently false. It is inaccurate and it's detached from the reality. The report just then expressed the idea that there's some sort of mutually assured distraction that's at play that's preventing either side from really going all in into this fight. Let me assure you, if Israel makes the decision to move forces en masse and to operate and to maneuver in southern Lebanon, we will smash Hezbollah. We will smash them. We will work to destroy them. And at the very least, we'll work to downgrade them. There's no mutually assured destruction at play whatsoever. What there is, however, is too much hesitation when it comes to making the decision to maneuver there. And the reality is, Hezbollah is continuing to fire upon us precisely because they are not deterred. And we are the ones, Bonita, who are paying a heavy price. We have 80,000 residents from that region with no homes, who are living as entire families in single-room accommodations throughout this country. For them to go home, we have to go forward and smash Hezbollah. That's the reality at play. And I just want to take one other step backwards to our earlier item. Let us not forget, as Sisi calls for the reaching of some sort of negotiated release of the hostages and some sort of improved lifestyle for the Gazans, all of us should be very clear-eyed that Egypt is an operator that played a massive part in what took place on October 7th, letting contraband through its border at the Sinai Peninsula into the Gaza Strip. And also, Egypt and Sisi are both eminently well-resourced to alleviate the suffering, so-called, of the Gazans inside the Gaza Strip at this time. Let them go into the Sinai Peninsula. Let them find refuge and safety and succor there. That's what should be done with those who are in the area right now of Rafah.
Which brings us back to our earlier discussion about specifically what may unfold in Rafah. A couple of things. First of all, the way the fighting there would be far more intense in terms of the number of people there right now, the density of the population in Rafah compared to other parts of the Gaza Strip, and the fact that already 2 hostages have been rescued from Rafah, and it seems to be very likely that there are more hostages being held there as we speak. So given the deadline of Ramadan that you alluded to earlier, talk to us about the risks involved of a full operation in Rafah soon.
So the risks that are attendant to any military operation, especially a large-scale military operation, are well known to all of us. We're all looking on as we see the ever-rising tragic body count of our soldiers who fall in the course of this fight and in this war. With that having been said, the battalions of Hamas that are stationed there in Rafah are not the most potent battalions. Those were in Khan Yunis, it's generally assessed. Khan Yunis is being dealt with. We're in the final stages of clearing out that area and taking control of that area. And we did it very, very handily. In terms of those who are gathered around, the civilians, if you like, the Gazan civilians in the area, I've actually got no concerns about this whatsoever, and I'll explain why. There are many countries that are lecturing Israel on the importance of coming up with some sort of plan to move the civilians away from the area of the fighting before the fighting begins. Let us all remember, the 1.2 million civilians that are estimated to be there in Rafah are there purely because Israel took the time to move them out of harm's way as we operated north of Rafah. We require absolutely no lectures on this point, and I'm very confident that Israel will come up with a very clear plan to move those civilians away from harm's way in the event that we decide to move and to fight in Rafah. And I believe that we will do. I believe we should do. And as I said, we should do so swiftly, and we should not pay any heed to the calendar or the incoming festival of Ramadan. I don't believe that we should be slaves to that calendar.
Talk to us then about the pressure from the United States. Benjamin Netanyahu saying overnight most Americans support Israel. Is that your sense, and how worrying is that pressure out of Washington as we speak?
Yeah, there was a Harvard-Harris poll that was taken, and it demonstrated that 82% approximately of Americans are supportive of the state of Israel and its actions during the course of this war. There's definitely pressure coming from the international community. There's definitely pressure coming from the American president. The priority of the American president, incidentally, is not to think about what's best for Israel. I know many of us want that to be the case. It's not the case. The priority, however, of the Prime Minister of the State of Israel is to do precisely that. It is his job to act and to legislate and to operate according to what is in the best interests of the State of Israel. I hope, therefore, that he will shun any and all pressures coming from even our closest friends, including the Americans, including President Joe Biden, and move to bring about a conclusion of this war. And that conclusion should be one that is synonymous with victory. I believe that that can be done. Now, I also will tell you that I don't think that President Biden is adhering to the positive and supportive tone with which he spoke at the beginning of this war. We can see that that is ebbing. That's lamentable and regrettable. It's natural, but we cannot be in the business of operating according to the rhetoric coming out of the White House. We have rhetoric coming from this country. We've got hostage families who want their hostages and their relatives home. We have soldiers who are paying an enormous price on the front lines. We need to make all of this worthwhile, bring them back, the hostages, and bring our soldiers back victorious from the battlefield.
It's a very big election year in the United States right now. Obviously, the focus on that in terms of what is unfolding in various areas, including Michigan as we speak.
Yeah.
Your sense specifically about the risks that Joe Biden is taking in terms of the way he has been supporting Israel, the way progressives within his party are unhappy with that, and what it means long term for Israel. You are suggesting the support isn't quite the same as it was in the beginning in terms of the president. How do you see it unfolding through Joe Biden to start?
So, very good question, Benita. First of all, we've seen this before. This is a movie that's familiar to us. You'll remember that in 2008, 2009, there was a president-elect. His name was Barack Obama. We were operating during Operation Cast Lead, and we made sure that we withdrew our troops prior to him coming in and taking his Oval Office position in 2009, January 2009, having been elected the previous November. The reality of the matter is that while 82% of Americans support us, elections don't actually tend to be won and lost by the popular vote. They tend to be won and lost in policies, and political platforms, party platforms, tend to be crafted according to the wants and the wills of the vocal, active minority. There's clearly, to your point about Michigan, a very vocal, active minority within the left of the political spectrum over in the United States of America. I hope that the president will not pay them too much heed. And I want to just add one slightly religious tweak to what I'm saying, even though it's not necessarily in vogue to do so. There is that phrase, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. I believe that if an American president stands by the state of Israel, he'll reap the rewards. Biden's support for Israel at the beginning of this war was tremendous. It was unprecedented. Every single commentator was saying the American president will come in and he will stop this war within just a few weeks. Hamas was counting on that. He hasn't done that yet. And despite the unfortunate rhetoric that he's made on chat shows and talk shows, I think we should watch the deeds. And the deeds are that we have the supplies that we need. We are seeking to have those supplies continued. And he has not yet made any explicit call for this war to be brought to an end.
Well, we certainly are going to watch to see how it all unfolds at the end of the day. Israel has to do what it has to do to defend itself. Obviously, allies are important. We watch to see how it all unfolds. Benjamin, I want to change now to a slightly different tack, but it is a crucial one, and that is a development here in Israel, PTSD. Very important, obviously, during a war, and obviously something that so many across the nation can relate to. The IDF, the military, is saying a medical corps is announcing tomorrow it's going to inaugurate a new mental health center for soldiers. You yourself are a reservist. You have fought in wars. Talk to us about the significance of this message right now. We're in the middle of a war and the center is being launched. PTSD is something that is so prevalent. Talk to us about the significance of this announcement.
Yeah, what another wonderful testament to the advanced thinking of the Israel Defense Forces and the care that it shows to its soldiers. I, some years ago, was responsible for a delegation that brought the Surgeon General of the Israel Defense Forces at that time, Brigadier General Professor Tarif Badel, to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. He was the Undersecretary at that time. His name was Dr. David Shulkin. Israel's know-how with regard to PTSD is critical. I believe that we'll show advanced steps in caring for our soldiers, but it's vital that it be set up now and ready to receive the soldiers and indeed the citizens of Israel when the guns fall silent.
Benjamin Anthony, CEO of the Miriam Institute, an absolute pleasure to hear your insights. Thank you very much for being here in the studio.